It was a Monday night, prime time in America. CNN's flagship show The American Pulse was broadcasting live from its Manhattan studio. The guest of the hour was none other than Tulsi Gabbard, the newly appointed Director of National Intelligence, DNI, under President Donald Trump's second term. A former congresswoman, combat veteran, and presidential candidate herself, Tulsi was no stranger to controversy or the spotlight. CNN had promoted the segment all week. Exclusive, DNI Tulsi Gabbard live with Kaitlan on Russia, China, AI surveillance, and more. But what viewers didn't know was that Kaitlan, the show's anchor and a CNN mainstay, had a personal score to settle. Rumors inside the media world suggested Kaitlan wasn't pleased with Tulsi's meteoric rise and had privately called her an authoritarian stream in an off-camera comment that had gone viral on X, formerly Twitter. Still, Tulsi agreed to appear. The political climate in 2025 was thick with suspicion. Foreign actors were ramping up cyber attacks. Congress was locked in another budget showdown. And DNI Gabbard was under intense scrutiny from both political parties. Conservatives viewed her as a patriot who put America first. Liberals accused her of enabling Trump's policies on surveillance and foreign aggression. The stakes were high. At precisely 8 p.m., the camera panned across the sleek studio. The lights dimmed. Dramatic music played. Then Kaitlan appeared on screen wearing a fitted navy blazer, her expression poised but sharp. "Good evening, America," she began. "Tonight, we're joined by one of the most controversial figures in Washington, Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard. She oversees the most sensitive data in the U.S. government. Her decisions impact not just policy but the fate of democracy itself." Tulsi entered calmly wearing a black pantsuit with a small American flag pin. Her presence was magnetic. Quiet strength, eyes focused, demeanor unshakable. She greeted Kaitlan with a smile and a nod. Kaitlan didn't smile back. "Director Gabbard," Kaitlan started, "thank you for joining us. Let's begin with Russia. You recently briefed the Senate on renewed cyber activity targeting American infrastructure. Can you confirm if these threats are state-sponsored?" "Yes," Tulsi replied firmly. "Based on the intelligence we've gathered, these attacks are state-directed, primarily from Russia and China. But the broader concern is that America has allowed its digital defenses to decay over the last decade, under both Republican and Democrat leadership. That's what we're fixing now." Kaitlan raised an eyebrow. "Some would argue your view of fixing things includes mass surveillance of American citizens." "Some are misinformed," Tulsi answered. "We're targeting foreign threats. Full stop. Civil liberties are not a casualty under my watch." So far, it was a civil but tense exchange. But then, just 15 minutes into the interview, Kaitlan's tone shifted. She leaned forward slightly, clasped her hands, and dropped a verbal grenade. "Director Gabbard, many Americans are confused. You've served in the military, you've been a Democrat and independent, and now you're serving under President Trump. Some critics say your views are, let's say, foreign to traditional American ideals. Do you think your background as a Samoan and Hindu has shaped a worldview that's incompatible with Western values?" Tulsi blinked. Just once. The room went still. Backstage, even the sound engineers froze. The words hung in the air like smoke after a bomb. The racism was thinly veiled but unmistakable. For a moment, Tulsi didn't respond. She adjusted her microphone and sat upright. Her voice was even when she spoke. "Kaitlan," she said, "let me make one thing very clear. My love for this country runs deeper than your ratings-driven script. I served in Iraq. I held dying brothers in my arms. I've bled for this nation. I took the same oath you claim to respect." She leaned in slightly. "So when you question whether I understand Western values, let me ask you this. What's more American than loyalty, service, and sacrifice? What's more American than standing up for the Constitution, no matter who the president is?" Kaitlan fumbled for her notes. Tulsi didn't stop. "The real issue here isn't my heritage. It's your assumption that someone who doesn't look like you or think like your producers must be inherently suspicious. That's not journalism. That's bigotry with a press pass." The silence in the studio turned from awkward to crushing. Even CNN's executive producer, watching from the control room, buried his face in his hands. A wave of online reactions exploded in real time. Hashtag Tulsi Strikes Back and hashtag Kaitlan trended within minutes. But Tulsi wasn't done yet. "You want to talk about traditional American ideals? How about respecting the people you interview regardless of where they come from or what they believe?" The camera caught Kaitlan blinking rapidly. Tulsi's voice never cracked. If defending America means I have to face racist jabs in a CNN studio, then I'll do that. Because the enemy isn't just on the outside anymore. Sometimes it wears makeup under studio lights. The commercial break cue blinked red, but no one dared cut to ad. When CNN finally cut to commercial 90 seconds later than scheduled, the control room was in chaos. Producers scrambled through scripts, unsure whether to resume the show or abort. Kaitlan Collins, usually composed even under fire, sat stiffly in her chair, her fingers gripping the edge of her desk. Her earpiece buzzed frantically with commands she chose to ignore. Meanwhile, Tulsi Gabbard remained calm. She reached for the glass of water on the table, took a small sip, and smiled grace under pressure, the calm after the storm she had just unleashed. The silence wasn't weakness. It was power. Backstage, a junior floor producer whispered to a colleague she'd just ended Kaitlan on live TV. Back in the studio, the cameras resumed rolling. Kaitlan tried to recover her composure. She forced a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and turned back toward the guest whose words were now echoing across millions of households. Director Gabbard, Kaitlan said, voice shaky, you've clearly struck a nerve with your comments. Let's return to the topic of national security. Tulsi nodded, her tone cool but firm. Let's. The segment pivoted to discuss cyber threats, AI weaponization, and border intelligence. Tulsi laid out sharp, intelligent answers with precision. She was clearly briefed, prepared, and battle-tested not just by war zones overseas but by ideological warfare at home. But the internet had already erupted. On X, Tulsi's response was being reposted, subtitled, clipped, and shared across political aisles. Even those who disagreed with her policies acknowledged her clarity and poise. At Ben Shapiro, Kaitlan Collins crossed a line. Tulsi Gabbard responded like a professional and patriot. Absolute masterclass. At AOC, disagreements are one thing. Racist undertones are unacceptable. That moment on CNN was disgusting. At Elon Musk, respect to Tulsi. America needs more leaders who won't cave to identity-based attacks. Back at CNN headquarters, internal emails were flying between legal and PR teams. The question wasn't just how the network would defend Kaitlan, it was whether they could. The phrase racist jab had already been adopted by journalists from Fox News, NewsNation, and The Hill. The headlines were brutal. Tulsi silences CNN's Kaitlan Collins after ethnicity comment, Fox. DNI Gabbard goes scorched earth on live TV, The Daily Caller. Was Kaitlan's question racist? America debates Politico. Inside the White House, President Donald Trump was watching from the West Wing with a Diet Coke in hand. He leaned back in his leather chair, smirked, and said to his chief of staff, "That's why I picked her. She's a fighter. And she just buried CNN without breaking a sweat." Vice President J.D. Vance, who had joined him moments earlier, nodded slowly. She made them look like amateurs. By the end of the hour, Tulsi's appearance had already become one of the most watched clips in CNN history. Their YouTube upload had been up for barely 20 minutes before it passed 1 million views. But there were deeper consequences brewing. Inside CNN, executive leadership called an emergency meeting. Staff were divided. Some defended Kaitlan, saying her question had been clumsy but not intentionally racist. Others said they'd seen a pattern in her interviews with non-white guests, and that this time, she crossed a red line. The next morning, CNN issued a generic press statement. CNN takes matters of journalistic integrity seriously. While we support hard-hitting interviews, we regret the phrasing of certain questions and affirm our commitment to respectful discourse. It didn't help. Memes flooded social media. One showed Tulsi calmly sipping water while CNN's logo burned in the background. Another labeled her Director of National Intelligence and savage comebacks. Meanwhile, Tulsi was already back at work in D.C. She didn't comment publicly on the interview. She didn't tweet. She didn't gloat. But her silence spoke volumes. Kaitlan, however, was under siege. Think pieces emerged from all corners. The New York Times published an op-ed titled, "When Questions Turn into Dog Whistles, the Gabbard-Collins Incident and What It Reveals About Media Bias." CNN insiders leaked that Kaitlan had been placed under internal review, the kind of corporate limbo where careers often quietly end. Back in Hawaii, where Tulsi's family still lived, her mother Carol was stopped in a grocery store. "Tell your daughter she made us proud," said an elderly veteran with a Marine Corps pin on his collar. That wasn't just for her. That was for all of us who've been othered and still showed up to serve. Carol smiled softly. Tulsi's phone buzzed with texts from generals, former colleagues, and even political rivals. One message, though, stood out. Next time you take down the media on air, give me a heads up. I'll grab popcorn. Senator Tim Scott. Wednesday morning in Washington, D.C. started earlier than usual for Tulsi Gabbard. Her office at the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, ODNI, overlooking the Potomac, buzzed with quiet activity. But the mood inside her secure conference room was different now. Her communications chief, Devin, walked in holding a thick folder of press clippings and digital metrics. You want the good news or the avalanche? He asked, half joking. Tulsi glanced at him over her black coffee. Both are fuel, she replied with a grin. Devin laid the folder in front of her. Since Monday night, your CNN interview has racked up over 48 million views across platforms. You gained nearly 1 million new followers across social media. And we've had interview requests from every network except MSNBC, which, let's be honest, was never going to happen. She raised an eyebrow. And the avalanche? Devin sighed. Senator Elizabeth Warren just called for a Senate Intelligence Committee review of your leadership. Claimed your dangerous rhetoric is a threat to democratic values. Adam Schiff chimed in too. They're calling your comment about the enemy wearing makeup under studio lights a threat to press freedom. Tulsi let out a dry chuckle. So defending myself from a racist jab is now a threat to democracy? Welcome to Washington, Devin said. But Tulsi wasn't rattled. If anything, the backlash only confirmed what she had long suspected. The establishment feared clarity. They feared authenticity. And above all, they feared that someone like her, a veteran of color, a woman, and fiercely independent, couldn't be controlled. Still, her team was cautious. CIA Director Mike Pompeo, brought back into intelligence oversight during Trump's second term, called her personally. I've been in your shoes, he said. You said what needed to be said. Just keep your head down and keep producing results. Washington has a short memory. Results, not rage, last longer. But it wasn't just Washington watching. Across Middle America, from retired service members in Ohio to teachers in Florida, people were inspired by her strength. Local radio shows were playing her CNN clip like it was a battle hymn. Moms posted videos of their daughters saying, I want to be like her. And the White House? President Trump was thrilled. At the morning national security briefing, he walked in holding a printed meme someone had left on his desk. It showed Tulsi standing over a collapsed CNN logo edited like a movie poster with the text, Gabbard, Intel with honor, coming this November. He slapped it down on the table. We're keeping her on TV. Get her on Rogan, get her on Tucker, I don't care. She's gold. Absolute gold. Trump turned to J.D. Vance. You see that composure? That's what you need on the ticket in 28, partner. That's presidential. Back at CNN, Kaitlan Collins was in damage control mode. She had issued a carefully worded tweet. I regret how my question came across. My intention was to explore the complex intersection of culture and leadership. I respect Tulsi Gabbard's service and her perspective. But it wasn't enough. The CNN newsroom was split. Young reporters whispered about how Kaitlan had a pattern of condescending tones with conservative guests, especially women. Veteran anchors like Anderson Cooper avoided the subject entirely on air, pretending the incident was behind them. But in reality, Kaitlan's credibility had been deeply wounded. The ratings for her show dropped by 18% by Friday. Online sentiment analysis showed public trust in her journalism had fallen to its lowest in 2 years. Meanwhile, Tulsi went on with her work. She declassified a major report showing the extent of Chinese surveillance efforts inside U.S. universities. Her office arrested a dual national cyber operative tied to North Korea. She met with bipartisan members of the House to brief them on AI-generated propaganda campaigns from foreign actors. In every appearance, she was measured, firm, and untouchable. But Tulsi knew the media wasn't done with her. The storm wasn't over. That evening, Devin approached her with a private note. CBS is planning a panel special this Sunday. The Gabbard question, can patriotism go too far? They're bringing on Joy Reid, David Frum, and even that Stanford professor who called you a Trojan horse of autocracy. Tulsi smiled. Let them talk. While they sit in studios, I'm dismantling foreign cyber rings and protecting Americans. Then she paused. But next time they bring up patriotism, remind them who wore the uniform. To her supporters, she was a living embodiment of American strength. Someone who transcended politics and spoke truth to entrenched media power. To her critics, She was dangerous. Too blunt, too independent, too willing to serve under President Trump, who remained a lightning rod in American discourse. But Tulsi never asked for anyone's permission to exist in the gray areas. At the ODNI headquarters in McLean, Virginia, Tulsi walked into a classified meeting room where a red blinking light indicated active surveillance protection. Her top intel officers were seated, analysts from CIA, NSA, and DIA. The situation they were tracking was deadly serious. A coordinated cyber intrusion attempt on U.S. power grids traced back to a military-linked server farm outside Harbin, China. "We have enough to prove attribution?" she asked sharply. "Yes, ma'am," an NSA analyst confirmed. "We cross-referenced the malware signatures with the same group that hit India's critical grid 2 years ago. Their fingerprints are all over this." Tulsi nodded, her mind racing with scenarios. A cyber attack wasn't just digital, it had physical consequences. Hospitals, airports, transportation, power outages. Prepare an emergency briefing for the president. Tonight. Then she looked across the table. "And get me a line to Director Pompeo. We might need to authorize offensive cyber actions within the hour." While she was putting out real fires, the media circus raged on. That Sunday, CBS aired their special panel discussion, The Gabbard Question. It was as biased as expected. Joy Reid accused Tulsi of being a military-grade puppet of Trumpism. David Frum claimed she echoed Putin's anti-Western narratives. The Stanford professor smugly argued her poise on CNN was a masterclass in calculated demagoguery. Yet, something strange happened. Viewers didn't buy it. Even apolitical Americans sensed the desperation. The clip from CNN was still fresh in everyone's memory. Kaitlan Collins implying Tulsi wasn't traditionally American because of her heritage and Tulsi eviscerating her with grace and moral clarity. Public opinion polling released that evening by Gallup shocked the establishment. Tulsi Gabbard, 62% favorable across all demographics. 81% among veterans. 58% among independents. 46% among registered Democrats. Tulsi Gabbard, long written off as a fringe voice, was now the most trusted public official in the Trump administration, surpassing even Vice President J.D. Vance in approval. President Trump wasn't just pleased. He was scheming. "Put her front and center on China," he told his senior staff. "Americans don't trust the bureaucrats, but they trust her. Tulsi's got the grit. She's got the spine. Hell, if I were 10 years younger and single, I'd propose to her." The room laughed nervously. By Monday, Tulsi was in the Situation Room, briefing the President, J.D. Vance, and Secretary of Defense Tom Cotton. "China's not just probing our defenses. They're mapping soft targets. We need to show we're not passive." Trump leaned forward. "What are you suggesting?" "A precision cyber counterstrike, targeting their surveillance data hubs. Let them feel the heat, not the public. We make them blink without putting soldiers in harm's way." J.D. Vance looked impressed. "Minimal escalation?" "Exactly. Clean, quiet, but decisive." Trump approved the plan. Within hours, a cyber counter-operation, codenamed Operation Firewall Fox, was launched. It disabled multiple Chinese satellite uplinks temporarily and caused a cascade of data loss in 2 major intelligence facilities. No American lives were put at risk. No official declaration was made. But Beijing got the message. The U.S. had teeth again, and Tulsi was commanding the bite. That evening, Tucker Carlson opened his show with a bold declaration. "Say what you will about the Trump administration, but tonight, America is safer because Tulsi Gabbard is on the wall." But even as foreign enemies reeled, domestic ones regrouped. Behind closed doors, a coalition of media influencers, political donors, and think tanks began whispering about how to neutralize Tulsi before she could gain more ground. In Georgetown, an elite dinner hosted by a liberal PAC buzzed with chatter. "If she runs in 28, we're screwed," said one senior DNC consultant. "She's Trump's ace. And worse, she actually believes in what she says," added another. But their worst fear wasn't that Tulsi Gabbard was popular. It was that she was effective, unshakable, and increasingly untouchable. By Monday, Tulsi was in the Situation Room, briefing the President, J.D. Vance, and Secretary of Defense Tom Cotton. "China's not just probing our defenses. They're mapping soft targets. We need to show we're not passive. Trump leaned forward. What are you suggesting? A precision cyber counterstrike targeting their surveillance data hubs. Let them feel the heat, not the public. We make them blink without putting soldiers in harm's way. J.D. Vance looked impressed. Minimal escalation? Exactly. Clean. Quiet. But decisive. Trump approved the plan. Within hours, a cyber counter-operation codenamed Operation Firewall Fox was launched. It disabled multiple Chinese satellite uplinks temporarily and caused a cascade of data loss in 2 major intelligence facilities. No American lives were put at risk. No official declaration was made. But Beijing got the message. The U.S. had teeth again, and Tulsi was commanding the bite. That evening, Tucker Carlson opened his show with a bold declaration. Say what you will about the Trump administration, but tonight, America is safer because Tulsi Gabbard is on the wall. But even as foreign enemies reeled, domestic ones regrouped. Behind closed doors, a coalition of media influencers, political donors, and think tanks began whispering about how to neutralize Tulsi before she could gain more ground. In Georgetown, an elite dinner hosted by a liberal pack buzzed with chatter. If she runs in 28, we're screwed, said one senior DNC consultant. She's Trump's ace. And worse, she actually believes in what she says, added another. But their worst fear wasn't that Tulsi Gabbard was popular. It was that she was effective, unshakable, and increasingly untouchable. It was now 2 weeks after the CNN interview that shook the country. The world had moved fast, covert cyber battles with China, secret briefings to Congress, power plays within the White House, but one name still dominated headlines, Tulsi Gabbard. On a chilly Thursday morning, Tulsi stood alone on the balcony of the Eisenhower Executive Office building, sipping coffee, her gaze fixed on the Capitol in the distance. She wasn't thinking about ratings or viral moments. She was thinking about legacy. Her phone buzzed. Ma'am, Devin texted. Kaitlan Collins just resigned from CNN. Tulsi stared at the message, emotionless. It wasn't a victory. It was inevitable. Inside CNN, the network had caved under pressure from all sides. Sponsors threatened to pull ads. Viewership plummeted. Senior anchors refused to work with Kaitlan, fearing guilt by association. The network issued a final, stiff statement. CNN and Kaitlan Collins have mutually agreed to part ways. We thank her for her years of service and wish her well. On social media, the reaction was mixed. Some media figures defended Kaitlan's career, calling her a victim of the cancel culture she helped create. Others simply said she poked the wrong tiger. Tulsi never commented. She never needed to. But the media's reckoning wasn't over. At a press conference that Friday, Tulsi stood at the podium with the seal of the ODNI behind her. The room was packed with journalists, many of them cautiously respectful after the recent drama. Good afternoon, she began. This week, my office completed a 6-month investigation into the coordinated spread of misinformation by foreign actors targeting the American press. She held up a thick report stamped with the words confidential, now declassified. This report proves what we've suspected. Hostile governments have been funding digital disinformation operations aimed at U.S. media institutions both left and right. The goal? Erode public trust, polarize our society, and make truth impossible to find. But let me be clear, she said, her voice rising, they're not succeeding. Tulsi leaned forward. The American people may be divided, but they're not blind. They're waking up. They're rejecting manipulated narratives whether they come from Beijing, Moscow, or a Manhattan newsroom. The room went silent. Journalists who had once scoffed at her now scribbled furiously in their notepads. Accountability, she concluded, starts with self-reflection. If our media fails to act as a check on power and becomes the power, then it is no longer serving democracy. It's undermining it. That speech aired on every network, live. Tulsi didn't ask for permission. She didn't pull punches. She redefined the conversation.